Bonjour, mesdames.
Good afternoon, ladies. Again, a women roundtable. I'm going to introduce you very quickly, and then we'll start talking about this fascinating topic, what images to tell the world to children. So, Myriam Dahman, you are a children's book writer, and you work for the French Agency for Development. Laurence Le Guen, you're the specialist for photograph for children's book, and you're also part of the CELAMS laboratory for the University of Rennes and the University of Leuven, and literature teacher in Loire-Atlantique. And you work for Regarde. It's a book that gathers 100 photographs. It's an exhibit from 31st of March. No, sorry, the 1st of to 31st of March 2024. And Gilles Tabiro, you're a publisher. You founded in 2007 the publishing house Kilowatt, and you're leading this publishing house. And you publish documentary books for children. So you, all the three of you, work on children and the images we show children. So Galia Tapiro, could you tell us why this image, this illustration topic is important for you in your publisher position? Well, the role of a publisher is also to think about what images are. Images such as they represent something, ourselves, nature, animals, the world. And so I founded Kilowatt in 2009, not 2007, 2009. It's been 15 years this year, and I work on documentaries in particular that offers some kind of thought on our society, the way we inhabit the world. These documentaries are illustrated, and these illustrations represent or illustrate society. And so my thoughts, or the thoughts on society are shown in these documentary books. And of course, it is the illustration of what we want to see appear in these illustrations. Especially because illustrations are just another way of giving a narrative, of reading a story, of reading a documentary book, and so the children can read autonomously, and so it's these books, and so these illustrations are essential in these books. Laurence Le Guen, you have listed a list of books in your PhD, so a number of books, illustrated books. Books with photographies. So how is photography and children's books connected, intimately connected? It doesn't seem like the photographs are very important in children's books. And when I first started my PhD, my thesis director thought that I was going to find only a few hundred of these photographs, but in fact it's thousands of them that we find. And it started around 1860, roughly, and these photographs started to disseminate, and photographers started working in all fields of literature and children's literature. So we find them in discovery of the world, in propaganda, books. all the categories of children's literature have been illustrated with photographs. And photographers don't merely illustrate, but they are another sort of language, different from words. So as of, starting in 1860, these photographs have been present in a lot of books, in documentary books especially. And it wasn't always the case. There were periods where there were a lot of photographs, especially in the 1950s, which was the golden years of illustrated books for children. But it was then rejected, in fact, in following years. And so we have the feeling that it doesn't exist, even though it is a whole part of the children's books field. So we'll have a look at a number of photographs illustrating covers. One of the first photographs, French photographs, Emmanuel Souget, is the first the first picture book that was illustrated with photographs. This is considered the first illustrated book for children, 1866. It's Christian Andersen's verses, illustrated by the Denmark court photographer. This first picture book was published in 1931, illustrated by Edward Station, that worked in fashion and in collaboration with his daughter that was working for progressive movements. And so they thought that drawings was outdated and they had to use photographies from then on. Sorry, I just want to finish on this book. This first book is the first picture book that influenced a lot of picture books to come in Europe. Dominique Darbois, she in the 50s, in the Nathan Publishing House, she launched a collection called The Children of the World. And the children in the 50s that didn't have access to television and didn't travel, they could find out about the lives of children from everywhere around the world. So everything was designed, the graphic design, the photographs, everything was designed to attract children and create something that is appealing to children and not just a documentary. This is a series, the little Chinese fisher boy, and so this is printed in a font that is an illustrates or an inspiration from Asian fonts. So this is illustrated by Ila. She was a real star in the 1950s. That's a landmark book, and she also did a book with Jacques Prévert, the French poet. And so I've been naming names of photographers. There's big names in the history of photography, and so these photographs, the photographers, Emmanuel Souget, Edward Station, Cindy Sherman, that we know for the way she puts up clothes, and she's changing her appearance, and so she's taken photographs for Bluebird. Sarah Moon. it received an award in the Bologna Fair in 1985. This was published in the United States with a caveat, handle with care. And so Sarah Moon adapted this this fairy tale and she's photographing the whole thing. And Takashin and Me, it's the last book that was published for the Montreuil book fair. It is another publishing copy of the of this Japanese book, and this Japanese photographer collaborated with an American publisher on 3 books for children. It's a Japanese tale. Photography was also used by propaganda, especially when fascism was on the rise during the Second World War in Europe. So this is an ABC book, and it's not that unusual because Pétain is part of all these books. The way it's a good illustration of how you can use photographs, and all the words that have been selected are in connection with the children's world. So we use the word flag, love, land, and when the Pétain is not there, his hat is there. So this is a photograph that we selected for the poster for the Douaneau exhibition. He published a great number of stories with children, and we can find these children. Sakatou, I like him a lot, because the journalist called Séverine, she's a feminist, she's very committed, and I like her a lot. When I defended my PhD, someone in the jury said it's not necessary, this book was not necessary, it was not indispensable in the biography, but this member of jury was wrong, because Séverine has published in Mercure de France an article in which she says photographies in a children's book, never, it's horrible. And then in 1903, she's published a very good book with the photography of a dog. And I didn't put the inside pages, but in 1903, we are kind of scared of photographs in books. It's rather for Osé books or for history books, but here we have to frame the photographs with lines to include these photographs. I could tell you a great number of stories about photographs in children's books. Myriam Dahman, you're a writer, and you're very careful about the way your texts are going to be illustrated, and you very often work hand in hand with illustrators. So can you tell us what is your role in your collaborations and what collaboration you do? Yes, I'm going to tell you about how it works for me. Well, first of all, I don't draw, I write. I have no talent for drawing. And I do only illustrated books, comic books, and illustrated books. And this is what I prefer doing. And this thing that I like is when we discover the illustrations. And for me, it's really an essential part. So very often, it's things that I'm going to work on with the illustrator, and it's not very often the case. Very often the publisher chooses who is going to work with who. And for me, I like to work very much upstream with the person, with the illustrator. And so I can see something similar to to writing a play. Some script writers, they also create or imagine roles, parts for this or that actor, actress. And so I also do that in my projects. I found out about a whole world, and the illustrator is not just a mere worker. It can be very free interpreting, and they could take me to a direction that I had not anticipated. And this is what is very rich and exciting. And so very often we write layers after layers. For me, the text is not set, and then I would give it to someone who's going to illustrate it. No, not at all. It's a permanent dialogue. We answer each other, we write and rewrite. And so we look for new characters, and we've just do sketches. So we just have the scenes that are laid in a simpler way before they are actually put in color. And this is a moment when things can change sometimes. There are very repetitive things, so we're going to take them out and then maybe find new options that I hadn't thought of beforehand, maybe. And so I'm going to follow on what was initiated by the illustrator, and this is something that we do layer after layer. And this is when we manage to dance, as it were, with between the text and the image. And this is something that I like a lot. And the same scene, if played differently, if set differently, is going to change a lot. So sometimes a joke is going to be funny or not funny, depending on whether we put this or that drawing or leave this or that blank. And so we keep adjusting micro details so that it is good, it works, or it doesn't work. It's very interesting, the fact that you're using the word dialogue. It's absolutely what we feel when we have a good children book in our hands. Both dimensions are present. Laurence Le Guen, do you want to say a few words about this dialogue between the illustration and the text? Do you see waves as well? Where would you think we're standing? Because I think that books illustrated by photographs are not that many, especially in fiction, right? I think we're in a good position. Now we have a great number of illustrations, photographs, illustrated photographs. I don't. Well, what I want to say is, a photograph book is one word. I think we have picture books, we have documentary books. We also have books illustrated by photographs. And when you ask publishers, Brigitte Morel, with the Grande Personne, she's going to tell you that it is difficult, it's not selling so well. She's helped a great number of photographers work, but people are less worried about these photograph books. But we find more nowadays. and yet it's still quite unknown. And my work as a researcher is to come to conferences like this and publish articles on this topic to make it known. I think we're doing well. I think compared to other periods, of course, it's not the golden years like it was in the 1950s, where all publishers had the collection of illustrated books, photo illustrated books. Earlier, you were asking this question about whether text or pictures come first. But in terms of photo literature, we can have a cooperative work, or we could have a text and then a photograph illustrating the text afterwards, or the photograph giving his photographs to a writer, and then that would generate an altogether totally different book. And you showed a picture earlier about the bears when she did the series on small lions. She did a series of lions that she had in a house, and she gave her photographs to Prévert, and she gave a photograph to Margaret Weisbrand and an American photographer, and it didn't give the same result. And then she, after her death, her photographs kept being given to different people, and every time it led to a different result. Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's very interesting to see the diversity of productions, and it may come from the images, and we might think that a photograph is showing reality much more than an illustration, and yet it's not that simple. I'd like to know your opinion on this matter, Galia, because in documentary books. Documentary books have very often been illustrated by photographs, as if when we are not dealing with fiction books, we needed photographs to represent reality. What would you think about that? How is it? How do you work? Well, when publishing documentary books, before I started Kilowatt, I had the desire to do documentary books that were more like albums. And they had illustrations, double pages illustrations like an album, and I wanted these documentaries to be read like a children album. And we're talking about the sense of wonder given by fiction, and I wanted I wanted the same feeling. When I was younger, I loved to read dictionaries. Okay, everyone their obsessions, but I would open the encyclopedia, and it was telling me a story that I never heard of before, and it was amazing, and it really touched my sense of wonder. And so I wanted to do illustrated fiction, and then I wanted to do illustrations as opposed to photographies because then I wanted to take documentary books out of school books. I didn't want these documentary books to be associated with schools. I know that a lot of teachers used them in schools, in class, but I didn't want them to be too closely attached to school. I wanted maybe more poetry, and when listening to you, I realized that this, in fact, has nothing to do. And listening to you, I also realized that we don't know what photo illustration is, and so we think about photographs that already exist, and we don't think about this collaborative work. And so, of course, I published an album by Isabelle Simon with photographs. So, so in fact, I did it, but I wouldn't have associated it or considered it as a documentary. Well, it's more a fiction than anything else, isn't it? Yes, absolutely. Yes, you're right. But just to conclude, I have to say that these illustrations, again, what Nathalie Sejean was saying, the parallel with fiction, I think that illustrations come to fill blank spaces. And just like Myriam was saying, when she talked about the dialogue, but when we write with writers, it's something that we, it's a part of the work I do. And sometimes we fill blank spaces with illustrations. Okay, we'll go further in detail with examples. Myriam Dahman, you have it here. You have 10 preconceived ideas on climate. You co-wrote it with Fleur Christofari. It's published with Glénat. And you worked with Maureen Polionac. And what could illustrations enable you to do in this book that photographs couldn't?
At first, I'd like to give you some background information. This book is the only non-fiction book that I've written. It merges both of my professional worlds. I'm an author in fiction tales, and on the other hand, as you said, I work for the Development French Agency. For several years, I've worked as a climate expert, and now I'm sharing my knowledge with young French citizens. So with this, I wanted both worlds to meet, and my colleague and I wanted to talk about climate change. I was immersed in this topic, and it triggered more and more questions in society. So we thought it was essential to address this topic in a book. And Maureen, as I said, quite often I work with illustrators beforehand. We had been able to work on 3 occasions, so I knew that Maureen also had this topic at heart, and that's about the context. Why illustration? I had chosen illustrations of the book Invisible Art. The author used words that I related to. When you work in illustration, and more particularly in an illustration that is not too much about realism, there's a type of closeness, close relationship that you create with the reader. The images are coming. Those images are very telling. It shows 2 faces, and when you see a face on a photo or on a realistic illustration, you see someone else's face, a character's face. And the more you simplify it, you make it minimal, the more you see yourself, you project yourself. So that was very interesting. The previous slide. So he explains, you've got this realistic drawing of a face, you see it as the face of another, and then an extremely simple drawing, and you see yourself. So that's why in his comic book he uses this character. It's a bit of an old book, so there's a lot of you might relate a bit more if you're a white man in this comic book, but there are lots of other examples, and I wanted my book to be on climate change. I wanted my readers to feel that they are concerned by this directly, not that it's someone else's problem, that there's a direct involvement. That's the first level. And secondly, it was much easier for me to use humor. Illustration is a way of using fantasy, use the absurd, and we talk about the ice cap, which in French is calotte, which looks like carrot. And so there's a little drawing of an icy carrot, and we explain that's not an icy carrot that we're talking about. And we use more complicated, there's a little bit of humor, a bit of something that is a bit more original. And with those drawings, you can use fantasy, imagination to explain more serious issues. We played as well with the concept of eco-anxiety. Yes, it's quite stressful what we're telling you about, but all the climate, my favorite climate authors are going to be turned into cute animals, and it'll be easier to understand it. It won't be as scholar. It will not use too much of a serious register, so we try and avoid confusing it with a school textbook. So those were the two parts that I wanted to play with. Galia Tapiero, you chose to illustrate your documentaries using illustrations. You've talked about it already. Maybe we can delve into the heart of the topic with visual examples. Could you tell us what directed your choices? I think what Myriam said, it describes also part of my approach here is an illustration from the book Write a Story. It was illustrated by Karine Vincent and written by Eric Le Gall. And with this book, we wanted to use Chinese characters. We wanted to use the person's haircut, calligraphy, use a sort of modernity as well in Japan to be able to both show calligraphy in Japan, the traditional technique, the kimono that is used, and the manga characters. There's a screen as well that we can see, characteristic to Japan. So something that is colorful and with this original approach we introduce concepts that are not necessarily obvious said, but we want people to understand that we want to be part of the atmosphere. When we sold the rights of the book to China, the Chinese publisher didn't want the young lady to have this haircut. It was a real struggle, relentless struggle, because he wanted to wear a traditional bun hairdo from the time. And we wanted to explain that there was this modern hairdo because of tradition, etc. So they perceived it as something that was shocking. That's a collection called One Day Elsewhere. It talks about a historical moment, a fiction, and at the end of the fiction there's a documentary. And the illustration in this documentary is a way of lightening up the documentary to give specific information on, for instance, the checkpoint. You've got an illustration of what a checkpoint is. And here, that's what Myriam was saying. there's a bit of a difference here. You've got the end of the Berlin Wall, a family that was separated. The parents stayed on one side, and the mother explains that some people tried to run away because life is hard on the other side, and others tried to dig channels. So there is a bit of a painful moment in the story where between a documentary and a story, and here with this touch of humor, we see that this slight shift is a way of softening something that is a bit more violent. With the documentary, it was a way of making more accessible, more playful. Describe a concept to lighten up another notion, give another reading of society, of the traditional interpretation of an event. And here it's a way of softening an explanation. And present it in a different time, in a different moment, in a different way compared to the traditional way. And a question, the issue of what is real, a relationship with reality. Laurence Le Guen, through illustrations and photo illustration, can you do the same? Sometimes, is it more of a symbolic representation? Could you give us some example? And is photography necessarily real? You can answer this question. It was used to learn, to serve learning from the start. In the 80s, we were showing photographies in villages, schools, to support science lessons. It was real. It was a representation of what you should know. So it's what we see in the first image books of the 30s. We have photographies of what is real. Apples are apples. However, the photographers in the 30s or today are quite subtle. In the image books from today, there are games in between pictures, questions. The text brings you another reading of what you think you're seeing on the image. And there are image books for adults as well, where the photographer is playing with graphism, with the text that you are going to read underneath the pictures. And here photography steps out from reality to leave more room to imagination. We know that photography can be framed. You're making choices. The photographer is making a choice so that not everything is shown. There are also photographies that are assembled, and the text attached to it is also talking about the photographies. It's not always reality that it describes. Tana Oban published the first image books in the 70s, and she was interested in the way people would see the world. American children in New York. She played with all types of graphism that we can see in the street to give a certain representation of reality and to encourage young children to look around. So it's a reality with a specific frame. so that you highlight a specific point of view, because photography is about points of view. It's quite a funny one. It's called Diplodocus. Lucie Albon's last book called Murmure. And you play with photography and graphism. So it's showing reality, but it's enriched with characters, with a text. A certain type of reality that we're showing here. It's quite far from the first photos that were serving the description of the world. All those books are extraordinary. The great photographer Frank Horvath discovers Photoshops and Apple in the 90s. He starts creating a series, one of them called the Mythology, and with Photoshop he creates fantastic beings that are half human, half animal. And for children, he creates Yao, the cat in the booth, and Puss in Boots. And he uses those photographies to also introduce farmers. He photographs his cat. And he explained that the children in the family were holding a piece of meat, and the cat would stand on its two back legs. Then the photographer's girlfriend would wear a hat and boots and be taken her photo of. And then we'd mix it all up, and that would become this photography. And this, so photography is not just about reality. You can play with photography and do a lot with it. In the 90s, it was criticized for being too real and for preventing children from imagining. Wegman is extraordinary as well. He published many image books and readaptation of traditional tales with his dogs. So the dog is called Man Ray. And here you've got Little Red Riding Hood, Cinderella as well. And all the characters from his books are featuring his dogs or other animals. So it's not reality here. Clearly not. And I feel that nowadays we all have phones we can use to take pictures of, and it's also interesting to see how taking a great picture, an artistic picture, is not just about reality. You're not just capturing reality. There are thousands of ways of doing it. Well, first of all, we're not all talented in taking pictures, and it all depends on the frame, on the point of view, the angle that you use. We all have a specific reality. We all take a picture differently compared to others. We've been talking about photography and illustrations as if there were two different things, and we understand that photography can be an illustration thanks to photo illustration, and an illustration is not just about a drawing. The solution is not necessarily to place them in opposition, and they are very porous borders in between the two concepts. Myriam Dahman, could you tell us more about those borders? I thought it was relevant to talk about Julia Sarda's work. I worked with her. It's this particular book. We're changing worlds here. We're talking about tales, fiction. It's not the real world. And I like to specify that Julia Sardas has all the merit here as an illustrator. She has found a lot of inspiration in a classical Russian illustrator, or found inspiration in Japanese stamp sketches. And I discovered that for one of the characters, a young girl who lives in the forest by herself, she's going to meet a wolf, and the book is about this. So she could have chosen a fairy tale princess with a white dress. And she wondered, what would be a real woman living in the forest by herself? And she read the story of Simona Kossak, a Polish environmentalist writer. And she lived for 30 years in a small house without electricity, without water, in the woods. And it really inspired her illustrative work. So that's the original picture. Here she's drawing with crayons, and you can see how she used the types of objects that she may have at home, the composition, how she's weaving wool, the types of decorations that she might have at home. She really used reality to feed her illustration, and then the final illustration here, and that was requests from us. As I work with a co-author, I wanted the reader to be able to see the face, because in the photo she's we can only see her back, and she's her face is directed at the window. So here you find this similar atmosphere. Another picture, I don't know if we've used it, with deer. So Simona's picture, she had a group of doe that was following her. And we've got this illustration with a wolf. We find the trees around. And it's really inspired Julia's work. In the context of tales, imagination, it gives you something that is more real, that is more rooted in reality. The way she's going to dress, the objects that are going to surround her is going to make it more logical, more real, because of the choices made by a real woman who lived in those conditions. So we see how those two worlds are very porous. This is a documentary work that is inspired by reality as well. Galia at Kilowatt. The illustrations that are also drawings, they are giving you some freedom that you wouldn't have otherwise. We're going to look at some of the examples you've chosen. On certain topics, it gives us more freedom in terms of interpretation and of the topics that we're choosing here. We're talking about getting dressed. It's going to be published in March, April, as part of a collection called Histoire de. It was written and illustrated by Luna Dovo. She first studied the textile and fashion, and then she traveled a lot so that she could study workshops in different countries, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, to see how they operated. It made her thought about getting dressed based on gender and how clothes are made with an environmental point of view in mind. So she suggested this series on clothing and how it questions our behaviors and the impact of our behavior on Earth and the way we live. So not just about clothing, of course, but also on what clothes say about us and the way we live. There's a page on underwear, and I thought that the illustration shows a character in the back, a historical character, and you can see characters from different backgrounds that are partly undressed. And here the illustration has a humoristic aspect. It's colorful. And there's a bit of distance as well, because when we address nudity, removing clothes, when we're only talking about underwear in different parts of the body, but when we start talking about bodies, the illustration for young people becomes a bit trickier. On this one, you can see what clothing can claim, the sort of political engagement that one might have. In this specific case, it was a way of showing different times in parallel. When I was talking about nudity, I was thinking about this, because in getting dressed, there's a part on underwear, but also a part on nudism. The fact that certain people choose to live in nudity in certain parts of the world. We may think that with photographies, it might be a bit more complicated. I was thinking about Sarah Moon. There's a very concrete example. There are certain publishers that are starting publishing again beautiful photography books, and there was a publisher who wanted to republish a book with a picture of a naked girl on a beach, and the publisher didn't know what to do. Can we publish this book again keeping this picture, or should we remove the picture from the book? It's a real issue. You can't show a naked child in a book. Yes, exactly. It's exactly what the issue is. And Luna's illustration here was a way to hide what we thought was necessary to hide, but also a way to talk about nudism in a clear manner with colors, layouts that would allow those issues to be addressed in our relationship to bodies. And in this collection, and I'm going to get back to it, but regarding what Laurent said, in the collection, the previous title is about washing ourselves and cleaning ourselves. And in this book, there's a child that is standing with his or her back at us and with a naked bottom. And this is making people laugh, and it's what people can see very clearly. Here it's about disguise, costumes, carnivals, birthdays, and travesty. And once again, we see different times being juxtaposed. And it seems that with the illustration, it was easier to play with decors, with color, so that we can introduce this topic.
Yeah, it would have been difficult to put a photograph of a Roman or of prehistory man, of course. But yeah. But seeing these pictures might trigger questions from some parents or some teachers. Okay, if you can go back to the previous picture. Okay, so this here we're talking about clothes, pollution, and this can help us explain complex concepts touching upon global issues that might be more difficult to understand for kids. And so this is making it more obvious. And it also gives a vision of a foreign place. And with a lot of imagination in Budapest or in some northern countries. Here there's geothermia, and some characters on the left-hand side, right-hand side have add a bit of imagination. This is another book dealing with borders. It is quite complex. It's going to be published in a few months to come. We're still working on it, and it's, of course, difficult ideas. The idea of borders at sea, distances. We could also have used graphic design, but we chose illustrations that's very clear, it's very colorful, so it's more appealing. And even if kids don't feel like reading the whole text, there's a lot of information given by the illustration. And yes, I totally agree with what Myriam was saying. I think this picture is in red, green, blue because it's not the right colors. It's my mistake, actually. I must have given the wrong picture. But it's a book on inclusion, gender issues, and so in fact, illustrations can very easily give an idea of those topics. Yeah, we see a great variety of these images, and Gaia, what you are saying is that you can juxtapose things that in books that don't exist juxtaposed in reality. But maybe the question we ask ourselves is what images we make accessible to children, and how do they respond to these pictures, and is it really crucial for them? Laurence, yes, I have a scientific answer to give you. I'm going to give it straight away. When I was working on my PhD, I did a survey in Rennes, in a school there, with the Loustic laboratory. And we wrote a story that we had illustrated. We made it illustrated, and we used a scientific measurement device to analyze it and to see how much time each kid would spend on each picture, illustration, etc., how they would look at it. And the study showed that children like drawings, illustrations as much as photographs. And in fact, the problem raised by photographs in books don't come from children themselves, but by publishers or people who give orders. And yes, I want to say that it might be something to check, but publishing a photography's book is quite costly because there's a lot of work to be done to publish a photograph book, and even it would be even more expensive if we wanted to publish colored photographs. Maybe with new softwares like Photoshop, maybe it's a bit less expensive, but I think it's also an element to be taken into account. But you were talking about this recent trend of having photographs and drawings, illustrations in the same image. Maybe that's the way to go about it. Maybe it's changing and shifting. Yeah, it's a very good idea that both practices are used. I think as kids like it the same. Yes, I think what's important is what the richness of the offer. Yes, do you agree? Of course, I like the idea of having a photograph that is drawn on. I saw advocacies from Action Against Hunger, and they used photographs on which they actually drew. And so it was like comic books, boxes, and they would do that. They would draw on these photographs, and it's I think a very clever answer. And with social networks like Instagram, I think it's a very good way of raising awareness for this kind of NGOs. And we don't know what the images of tomorrow will look like. It's full of promises. Thank you very much. We're gonna stop now just to leave some time for questions from the audience. If you have questions.
On a une ici, une là-haut. Alors, la première qui a le micro pourra poser sa question.
Merci.
C'est là-haut.
Donc, l'image, c'est la porte d'entrée privilégiée.
Images are a good way for kids to read a book. It's commonly said that reading a text, look at an image, is less often used to say that we read an image. How do you explain this lack of practice reading an image?
La réflexion est longue, je ne l'ai pas. Comme vous le disiez dans ma présentation.
Well, it's quite a tough question, as you were saying earlier. I'm also a literature professor, and I strive to fight against this lack of practice, trying to use as many photographs as possible to illustrate what I want to stress, which is the history of photography. There were campaigns at some point. Jack Lang, the former education minister, had launched this. I can't remember the name of the campaign, but it was to make photographies rediscovered in school, discovered in schools. And I'm sure, I think, unfortunately, that school teachers are not trained to teach photography, to show photographers. And if I do that, it's because I have had the opportunity to do that in my studies, and I think it's for each professor, each teacher, to pass on his or her love for photographs, and unfortunately we're not trained to do that. Yeah, it is a training, it is an experience to be able to read images, to be able to decipher those images, and unfortunately those teachers, as Laurence was saying, are not trained to do that.
Oui, finalement, c'est très bien que ma question...
Very good transition, because my question also is on the way these books are perceived. How can we help children to understand these images, to read them, to understand them?
Ça réfléchit.
En fait,
They're thinking. Well, okay. I was just trying to find who had asked the question. I think we can give them clues to understand the images, but I think they already have them. They already know how to understand, read the images. I think they have much more acute perception, ways of perceiving an image than us. I think it's sometimes the images we see don't match the mental images we have as readers. I'm thinking now, I'm thinking of documentaries when I say that. I think because they're used to seeing images, they know how to read them, and I think quite naturally children are attracted to images more than texts. If I may add something, when I went to meet children in classes as illustrators, we very often go to school classes and meet children, or in book fairs as well. So I did that for text, but also very often I was with the illustrator, and the idea was to say how the book was created. So I'm going to do this for my text. So how I designed my plot, how I came up with the characters, and this name has an etymological meaning, and you might not know it, but it doesn't matter because it should work without you knowing it. And the illustrator is going to do the same. She's going to say, or he's going to say, why they choose this palette of colors, and how, why did I choose to, why did I decide to do this, and for working on gender diversity, then why did I choose to use this color for this kind of character? And then the pencil sketches I did, what did we decide to change or not change? So in fact, it's a mediation work that was done by creators on text and images, and this is a way of passing on these little explanations about our choices, about the choices we made, and so that they can understand the complexity of what lies in an image and text. Another thing, and I'm speaking as a professor, but in high school, in junior school, they learned that they're taught how to decipher images and recognize fake news, and they know that AI can generate fake images and that they have to be wary of it. And so that's something they learn, and they know, and they're told that not everything is for real, and that they have to know it. Are there any other questions? One there. The mic is coming to you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this very interesting roundtable. I like photographs a lot, and I've just found out about these photo illustration books. So, sorry, I want to say it's photo literature, photograph and literature. I put it wrong at some point, but it's photo and literature. Yes, in the children books that I read, in all those books, I never realized that photographs were so. They were so rare, and so. For example, I show a lot of photograph books with my kids that are 2-3 years old, and I have to say that we look now, for example, at books by Charles Frege, and we share a lot around these photographs, and so I think it's a good way of crossing the bridge between children or not children books. Yes, absolutely. And when I carried out my survey, I did a lot of interviews with photographs and institutions that favor photography for children, and I interviewed the person in charge for the learning approach in Lille. And in this institute, there are classes to help children find out about photographs, but they don't use books for children. They use photography books, to help children master language and ask them to respond to some photographs, and they may react depending on their personal history, the personal experience. And Charles Frege is a very good example because you can, of course, very easily use what we call adult books, photograph books, and but children are just moved by what they see, whether it is a children book or adult books. And very often, some photographers use their pictures, their photographs in books that are going to be books for children. But in the end, the book is going to be a children's book, but it wasn't. Those photographs themselves were not taken for children like Duano or R.G. Lando, whether it is for in their travels and journeys. Yeah, no, they didn't take pictures for children. Especially, you can absolutely show so-called adult photographs to children. Yes, to talk about the way to education to images, and we're talking about and to pick up on what we said yesterday. I know there's a participatory box, and would you know of photo literature books in which that would have a participatory approach, where children would be at the core of its making? You would find on my website. I'm self-promoting my work, but you will find reports of experiences where we had children collaborate on photo literature books. It does exist, but I can't remember. I forget the name just now. I will give you the information after. Good afternoon. I wanted to add something on what you said on nudity. A few years ago, I got a very beautiful book, and in this book were photographs of babies, and there was one baby being fed, and we could see just a little piece of the nipple, and I showed this book to a former student, and she's a young children's educator, and she said, no, I couldn't take this book to the creche. I couldn't show it around, and I was very shocked to realize that because you could see just a little bit of nipple that she thought she couldn't take the book. And so it's very much like, there's a lot of hypocrisy, a bit like Tartuffe by Molière. And so, yeah, this book couldn't be, it's just a testimony of something that happened to me. Well, I'm not surprised, and I want to say it might also be a cultural thing. And I know that in some countries it's very different, and I remember books that with the children being fed, and it was perfectly fine. I think it was in Japan, but in France it's not very well seen. And it's also a period of time, isn't it? Because in the 1930s you could see babies being fed. In the 1970s, you could see pictures of young children naked on beaches, and nowadays you can't do this. In France, yes, maybe it will come back.
Ça dit beaucoup de notre société, en tout cas.
It says a lot about our society, that's for sure. Any other comments, questions?
Très bien. Ben, merci beaucoup alors. Et puis on fait une petite pause. On va se retrouver à je ne veux pas dire de bêtises, à 15h30, donc dans 7 minutes, pour la dernière table ronde de la journée.
We'll meet again in 5-10 minutes for the last round table of this day.